Cashing in my pockets so my pennies should be. What they selling is cheap, so I'm buying that this freedom is free. I've been becoming me. See when Jesus taking the lead. With purpose I bleed and rise like going under the heat. Defeat is a never. You can't reattach with a sever. What's bringing you pleasure can tell you where you stacking your treasure. When storm is your weather, know that it gets worse for it's better.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Esau and Macaulay podcast. I'm your host, Esau Macaulay. I don't think I have a co-host, but since Mike is taking more and more of the show, do I need to start introducing you now?
I've been a little offended when you're like, oh, I'm joined by my friends, so-and-so and so-and-so, and you never include me.
Okay.
I'm just sitting here awkwardly to your side, like, I guess I'm not Esau's friend.
Also on the podcast, we have our producer, Mike.
Thank you.
And sometimes we have a guest on because we're promoting stuff. We also have some people who are just regulars, who are my friends, who I like talking to. So Malcolm does have a book called The Anti-Greed Gospel we want you to pick up. But we're done selling that book. If you haven't got it by now, you're late. We're having Malcolm on just because we want to talk to him and find out what's going on in the culture. We're going to debut a new segment on the podcast. It's called Freezing Cold Takes. Now, everybody has their hot takes, stuff that they saw in the news, things that are going on, what's popping in the culture, and you got to take. A freezing cold take is the opposite of a hot take. It's something that you just now found out about that actually is pretty good. And so it's like your way of apologizing to the culture for ignoring what they told you to do. So I will begin. Actually, no, you know what? In a spirit of generosity, we will let Mike begin with his freezing cold take of the week. What's your freezing cold take?
It's a slight spin on what you just said, but it's true in spirit.
Okay.
So my freezing cold take is that seasonal depression is real.
Oh.
So like,
He's like, I'm really sad when it's dark outside.
It's a thing.
Okay.
Like, I've lived my whole life in Illinois. So
Okay.
like, I'm just used to gray winters. It wasn't until college that I had all of my friends from these, more exotic places like,
With sunshine.
yeah, exactly. That they started complaining about how like, oh, it's so gray and dark in the wintertime. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you're kind of right, aren't you? And even then I'm like, oh, this isn't a thing. And then like this whole winter, I've just felt so down in the dumps and annoyed and grumpy. And now in Illinois, like we've hit 60 degrees here in the last week. And
Feeling
it's
great about
sunny,
life.
and we just had daylight savings time. So it's sunnier out. And I am so much happier than I've been in months.
So we want to apologize to the entire mental health community for ignoring seasonal depression.
My
Please
bad.
forgive us. Okay?
It's real. I believe in it.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
Malcolm, do you have a freezing cold take for us today?
Okay. So my take is it's probably a cool
take. Okay.
Cool take. Just because it's not. So my wife and I just finished watching Paradise, which just came out.
Oh, okay.
It just came out. But I avoided it. I mean, I saw stuff on social media about it being great.
Oh, I've been avoiding Paradise too. So yeah, this is a cool take. Yeah, is it good?
It's cool. It's a good show.
Oh, it's good. That gives me an example. I'm not gonna lie to you. This is too late to do it because it happened a long time ago. But you do not want to know how late I was to Ted Lasso. I mean,
bro, I still haven't watched Ted Lasso.
Or I saw what is it called? With the singing, the rapping about American history.
Oh, Hamilton?
I saw Hamilton like last
Yeah.
year. But my freezing cold take is kind of related to that. I found out this summer, and this is probably embarrassing because I was a football player, and so I always look down upon soccer as being like the worst sport because like they don't score goals. And I went to my first soccer match, a football match in England. And I'm not gonna lie to y'all, soccer is amazing. My freezing cold take is, my bad, rest of the world, your sport might be better than our sport. I mean, like,
What changed your mind?
Have you ever watched soccer? I mean, besides like the World Cup, have you actually watched skilled soccer and taken the time to figure out what's going on? It's amazing.
Esau, are you saying my 6-year-old son's soccer team is not skilled?
Yes.
That was miserable watching this year.
That's exactly what I was saying.
Little League sports is a totally different category. What I'm going to say is it's hard to explain it other than it is actually a beautiful sport. And you can have a dramatic 0-0 game. I just want to say this. I was where you were, Malcolm, and I'm gonna make 2 requests for you. Okay. A, go to a real game. How are you going to get to Europe? Don't go to Europe and watch a Premier League soccer game. Make that happen. Or just watch 2 or 3 soccer games in a row, and you will get what I mean. And once you do, you're like, oh, this is why the whole world loves this sport. And so
the whole world does love that sport.
And the crazy part about this is people I'm not going to say it's better than American football. I'm not going to go that far. But I'm saying it is an amazing sport. And I'm going to have people coming into the comments. My freezing cold take is probably the most pushback, but soccer is amazing. So sorry, rest of the world. Soccer is amazing. Speaking of soccer, so that's why I went last. We also want, this is like the debut. We're bringing out all of our best stuff. We also going to have a segment on the podcast, because I am a bit of a sports addict, that we're going to call Holy Sports. Now, we're not just going to listen to people thanking God after they win the game. We're going to talk about what's going on in the sports world and see how that might relate to what's going on in the world and the culture. And I promise every single Holy Sports is not going to feature a LeBron James story.
It seems like it, though, so far.
This is the LeBron James bobblehead, and he is my favorite player. But we're not going to talk too much about this. But did you see it? I don't think you saw it. I talked to you about this earlier. Did you see what happened between LeBron, Bronny James, and Stephen A. Smith?
Tell us, Esau.
Okay, let me set the scene. So for those of you who don't know, LeBron James, you know who he is. He's a superstar NBA player. And his son went pro last season he was drafted. And so he was drafted in the second round, the 55th pick, by the team that his dad plays for, the Los Angeles Lakers. And then he's the 55th pick, which is not very high, second round, back of the second round. And shockingly, after 55th pick, he's come in and he's not been amazing. He's stats not great. And so Stephen A. Smith goes on television.
Who's Stephen A. Smith?
Those of you who don't know, Stephen A. Smith is a host of the most popular sports show.
I think he's the highest paid sports commentator.
And he's now they did a thing recently with Stephen A. Smith where he was on they did potential candidates for president of the United States of the Democratic Party. And I think he got 3% of the vote. So Stephen A. Smith is doing what he needs to do. Yeah, this is y'all fault for not knowing about Stephen A. Smith. So Stephen A. Smith says, first of all, he plays he talks about all of Bronny's stats, calls him bad, which is most second round draft picks aren't going to be playing good their rookie year. Most rookies aren't going to be playing good their rookie year. And he says to LeBron, I'm pleading with you as a father, stop this. Basically get your son out of the league. He's only in the league because of you. And he's as a dad, we shouldn't have to watch this. And so a couple of weeks go by, and Stephen A. Smith is at a Lakers game. And during a timeout or in between quarters, not after the game, during a timeout or in between quarters, Stephen A. Smith is sitting at one of those courtside seats. LeBron leaves the bench, walks over to Stephen A. Smith and says, keep my son's name out of your mouth. And it's this big thing because he confronted him about the coverage of his son during a basketball game. And so this has been in the news the whole time. Now I'm going to ask you this question.
Yeah.
Have you, as a parent, I know because I have I have a 17-year-old, a 15-year-old, I have older kids. I have a 10-year-old and 8-year-old. And I've been in my feelings because of something someone did vis-a-vis my kids.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to ask you, have you ever been tempted to pull up on somebody because of what they said about your kid? Or on the other side, has your mom or dad ever intervened to defend Lil Malcolm?
Look, it doesn't look good for me to say that I would pull up on a 4-year-old girl. That's just not a good look for me.
Not a good look. We're going to protect you and say that's not actually. But you've seen people being mean to your kids and felt a certain way about it.
Look. So this was a few weeks ago. There was this group of girls that was excluding my 4-year-old.
Oh, not the exclusion.
And it was hurting her. Yeah. And I felt some stuff I don't think I've ever felt before. She was telling me about this, and I was almost tearing up with with anger. Like
Yeah.
that's what was going on with me. I had never felt that before.
Yeah.
I told my wife, I was like, baby, you're gonna have to do something because I don't know. I know they're just 4 years old. I get that. I get this is probably a normal thing. I need to process this.
I got to tell you about this. This is a couple of years back when one of my older kids was younger, and they were sliding down the slide, and so there was a line for whose turn it was. And we were back in my old neighborhoods. We were back in the bricks, right? And this kid like pushes my son like off the slide to like take the time, and the kid falls, and my son doesn't really recognize what's going on. And he said, "Hey man, why did you push me off the slide?" And the kid hits my son. I said, "Hold on." Hold on. Let me take care of this. Let me take care of this, right? And so I go and talk to the dad, right? And I'm saying to the dad, "Hey, man, your son, he tried to hit my son, blah, blah, blah." It wasn't like a punch. It was like a little small thing. He said, can you talk to your kid? Because like, and the dad got mad at me. He's like, "Tell your son." I was like, now the adults. I had to remember that I was saved. I had to remember that the Lord loves me and protects his people. And so I said, "You know what, son?" Because we were in my neighborhood and I didn't know who he knew. So I was like, "You know what, son? Why don't me and you both leave this playground before things get out of control?" I do think that what this is getting at is that you can be a billionaire. You could be a billionaire and be in the middle of an NBA game, and your son could be an adult. There's something about what the love that parents have for their kids that sometimes makes us want to lose all reason. I mean, are you one of those parents? I mean, hopefully, how are you handling this? Are you more like Bronny? I mean, are you like LeBron and me, or are you just like super stoic over there?
So like, similar to Malcolm, I have a 6-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old. So just starting this stage, and it is like this. Oh, like I want my like 6-year-old to have friends and be included, and I know it's not healthy to like helicopter over him, and like I feel like secondhand embarrassment every time he's playing with other kids in general, where I'm just like watching, like, "No, don't do that. No, why are you so weird? Don't just be normal.
Be cool.
Just be cool."
So one of the things about this, and I'm not trying to do like a Jesus juke, but one of the things this is raising in my head is when we think about fatherhood, especially God as Father, we ought to think of it in the terms of like tenderness. They're like, there's this whole thing. I don't know if you were there in this point of evangelicalism. We're calling God Dad instead of Father. But one of the things that you see in the Old Testament is that God is described as Father most often in the context of rescue. So like, when he says, "Israel is my son, and I've seen that he is suffering, so I've come to rescue him." And when people think about when the people of Israel were in exile and they were without hope, they would say, "But God is our Father." And the idea that there is this sense, not just for fathers, but we're dudes on the podcast, that when we see our kids in real danger, there's something within us that draws us towards this desire to rescue. And I actually think that's what the Bible is trying to get at when he talks about God as Father. Now, there's another part of this story that maybe might be interesting to you, because we often think about nepotism, whether or not this is a good thing or a bad thing. And some people are in their feelings because they say that Bronny would not have gotten drafted were it not for his father being on the team. I'm actually not sure that's the case, because he had basically the stats that's comparable to anybody else who drafted in the back of the second round. Now, whether or not the Lakers would have drafted him is a fair question. And so how do you balance, maybe y'all are young. So, I mean, your kids are young, but do you think about, like, is it your goal to kind of grease the tracks for your kids so they end up in this perfect space? Or are you one of those parents who at least philosophically say, "I want my kids to suffer so they know what it's like to struggle"? Like, how are you thinking about what you want? Are you gonna get your son or daughter their first job? Or are you gonna say it's on you? What do you think, Malcolm?
Well, I mean, meritocracy is already a lie. So if I have any opportunities to make life easier for my children, I'll probably do. Well, so like, I mean, I don't think I'll ever be. Just personally, I don't think I'll ever be in a situation where I can like get them their first job. But I do. But I do want to make sure that I want to make sure that they know that they have, that they have a safety net, especially in a world where those kinds of safety nets are being eroded.
Yeah.
I want, it's one of the reasons, even in thinking about the church that I pastor, like part of it is building those kinds of systems for people. And I would want to do the same thing for my children. I don't want it now. I don't, I don't want to lean toward either of those sides, because I don't want my child to suffer unduly. I want them to learn like the lessons of sanctification and endurance and things like that. But like, I'm not trying to press for my children to suffer.
Yeah. I think that we have this false conception, because anytime you have money and resources, that puts you proximate to power and relationships.
Yeah.
And so anybody who comes from middle class family or a wealthy family, and their neighbor, their church members work at this place and they can make a phone call. So there's 1,000 ways in which privilege, or even they say one of the biggest predictors of education is the educational attainment of your parents. And these ideas of legacy scholarships. And so I think it's really interesting that there tends to be selective outrage, because there's tons of people. I want to say there's tons of people, let's just say he might be related to politicians who have significant places in culture, who only have that place because of the proximity to power. And I don't see the moral outrage, but people are legitimately mad that Bronny James is in the league. Like, it's this cosmic injustice, like that he is not there. And I do think there is this idea that meritocracy is only kind of put forward when the object of concern is often a person of color. I'll put it that way. What I mean by that is all of the various perks that comes from being middle class and being proximate to power and having these relationships and having family and friends and these kinds of things are just seen as the way that the world works. And anytime you have someone who is like LeBron James, who actually has the power to put that into place for his son, then there's more outrage, because it seems to be indicative of a wider pattern that I don't think is actually the case. So I'm not going to lie to you. I will introduce my kids to anybody. As a matter of fact, I send emails to connect people all of the time, because what's the use of having power if not to give it away? The whole point, I think, of the relationship that you have because of the things that you've accomplished is that you have an opportunity to bring other people alongside with you. Now, obviously, people may feel a way that if that's your son, but the basic idea that the opportunities that we have are not for us, but for everyone who's associated with us is what I learned. My mom used to say to me all of the time, don't forget where you came from. And the purpose of not forgetting is actually to have some sense of, I don't want to say it. Should I say the word?
Yeah, say it.
Empathy.
Ooh.
Empathy and solidarity. Empathy and solidarity, bro.
Empathy and solidarity.
Empathy and solidarity, bro.
That brings us, I was not planning on doing that, but.
There we go. That's a good segue.
That's a good segue to our second topic. And it's another segment. I'm just making up segment titles, but this is another segment that we're going to call from here on out, What They Mad About Now. What They Mad About Now is a segment.
They always mad about something.
It's because, at least for me, there's these waves of outrage or anger or fear that sometimes like run across the Christian internet that everybody's talking about. And sometimes we can take them seriously because they're real issues that happen in the culture that need to be addressed. But some of them, I think, are rooted in kind of undue fears. And so what I've seen that they seem to be mad about now is this idea that the danger of empathy. So Malcolm, can you at least help us understand what's going on with empathy and what people are mad about, or at least afraid of, as it relates to empathy in the current cultural moment?
Yeah, so I'll draw a little bit of a distinction between the way that Ali Beth Stuckey and Joe Rigney talk about it, because they're the two. Big books.
For people who haven't read the article, but there have been some books and some articles about empathy. But let's give like the basic ways in which these people are talking about them. Yeah,
sure. Yeah. So Stuckey has a book called Toxic Empathy that's subtitled How Progressives Exploit Christian Compassion.
Yeah.
And then Joe Rigney has a book called The Sin of Empathy. And as Rigney will say, like the title of the book is meant to be provocative.
Yeah.
But the idea is that empathy has been misused specifically by progressives in order to get people to adopt positions because they feel guilty for not being empathetic enough.
Yeah.
And
now,
so basically,
can we pause right there for a second?
Yeah.
Can we at least grant that whatever else is going on in the book, let's not talk about we can at least acknowledge the reality of cultural shame. Yes. Where if you don't hold the values of the moneyed secular liberal elite, that you can be made to feel like a bad person. And part of what happens is there is a pressure for Christians, for the sake of some kind of cultural respectability, to go along to get along. So we can kind of acknowledge that as a thing that exists in the world. That in and of itself is not a ridiculous idea. But keep going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the issue is the issue at root is kind of emotional manipulation. Yeah. And for especially the two of them, they'll hone in on these particular political issues. So whether it's immigration, abortion, other things of that, or sexuality, that the argument is that, hey, progressives like press you to think, hey, you should have this position on these issues because people are suffering, and they just and the argument is that the use of that kind of argumentation is just like, it's guilt tripping. It's emotional manipulation. Both of them are I think clear in saying that, like, it's not that empathy, like, writ large is this terrible thing. Yeah. It's that it can be very easily misused. Now, go ahead.
Now, one of the things that I saw in that is that the way the empathy was defined, at least in one of the articles and interviews that I read, which was, it used to be the Christian compassion was this idea that you felt some sympathy for the things that were going on to the people who were suffering. And that what happened, I guess, obviously because of liberalism, empathy means to put yourself in the position of the person who's suffering and reason from there. And because you're reasoning from the position of the person who's suffering, you lose all sense of self and you just kind of get sucked along in this moral thing. But the other thing is that it used to be empathy towards a particular person. And now empathy means feeling all the things for everybody in the entire world.
Abstract. Right.
The abstract. So it's like, now you're supposed to care about everybody instead of particular people. Now, one of the things that I found really interesting about that, it maybe relates to what I've seen happening in a bunch of different words that we didn't fight about, is that you pick some stuff that you don't like in culture, and then you download all the worst things onto a word. So people used to, and it's often only possible if you have control of all the means of communication. And so we had a definition. I'm going to keep saying this, even though I feel like I'm the last person fighting on this wall. Woke simply meant socially conscious and aware of the sufferings that had happened in the past, and that you found out about Black history that you didn't know about, and because of that consciousness that you had, you are now aware of injustice that was going on in the world. It's a pretty standard definition. And we used to have jokes like in movies and in television about Black people who was like too woke. That was, in other words, we had a working definition of what it meant. And people just completely redefined the term to mean any leftist idea that I don't like. And it became an ism. And now people just toss out the word woke as if we know what it means. And in other words, because they had power, they could take this word and redefine it. Now what I see is happening is empathy is almost functioning as any sympathy that you have towards someone who is suffering is going to lead you towards moral failure. Therefore, you should close your heart to empathy, because allowing the door of empathy to open is going to lead you to ruin. You redefine the term to make the term itself dangerous when the term itself is either innocuous or even good. Is that a fair? Am I overreacting? Or
no, I think
the colonization of language, is that too strong a way of putting it?
Yeah, well, I think it's like a lot of the attacks on a lot of the DEI stuff. Yeah. The assumption is, hey, this is this ideological enemy, and so the idea is, well, you then fight it with essentially a counter ideology. Yeah. in this case, the issue with empathy is a kind of emotional manipulation.
Yeah.
Well, that also ends like the way that they're ending up, the way that they're fighting it is with another form of essentially emotional manipulation.
Yeah. Which is stoking fear.
It's stoking fear, and it's interesting. It's really interesting. In Rigney's conversation with Al Mohler, you get about halfway into this conversation, and they reveal that like actually to them like the real issue, where this stuff comes from, it comes from feminism.
Okay.
So what it comes from is the fact that like women who are more emotional and all this kind of stuff.
According to this argument, make sure you describe it.
According to this, yeah, sorry. According to this argument, that's the ethos that now people are afraid to combat against. And so in presenting themselves as these heroes, they'll say, I mean, and Rigney says this, where he's like, look, when in situations where you need fortitude and courage, women aren't supposed to, like, women aren't in those spaces. It's why, according to him, it's why they're not supposed to be ordained. All this kind of stuff. But there's this other fear that I think for them, it's, hey, we're losing this cultural power. Yeah. Like, let's blame this thing, like people feeling too much.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I always want to do is to put this thing in context. I want to acknowledge that emotional manipulation is a thing that everybody tries to do to get what they want. Yes. On the left and on the right. And this is not saying this is both sides do it equally. It's just saying that emotional manipulation, if you're saying that as a Christian, I need to be aware of emotional manipulation, that's fine. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. And this is what I really want to, this is the reason why I think, what are they mad about? Yeah. We also got to remember where stuff starts. Mm-hmm. And if you go back to say what was happening in 2020, 2019, whatever you want to say, we were saying, oh, historically, there's been a failure in parts of the church to deal with issues of race and misogyny, or even abuse. Like, these were the concerns. And so there might have been, I don't know how long people want to say this lasted, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, whatever the time period was, where we are beginning to address these concerns. Immediately, the concern that is raised is that we're doing too much. And we need to find a way to stop that. And so the real question you have to ask yourself is, if you go and you take a step back and you look at the church and say, you know, is the problem with the church actually that we're too nice to women, or that we are dealing too sensitively with race? Like, I mean, would anybody actually say that in most majority culture churches, the problem is we're too sympathetic to Black and brown people? That's actually not the case. I think that's a freezing cold take. Yeah. And so if you then have a book or an idea that has as its goal to close people's hearts to compassion at precisely the time when compassion is most needed, then I think that you're not serving the church very well. And I think it's fair to me to say, yes, it is possible. It is possible to get so concerned about certain theological issues that you lose your theological way. I wrote a whole book about this thing, right? Called Reading While Black, how to like care about justice and not lose your mind, right? And so there is obviously this danger. But one of the things you have to be able to do in your community is say, what's the actual besetting sin of my community? What is what is prophetic for me? And so I just don't see the cultures that, I guess I'll put it this way. The cultures that I perceive as least empathetic are the most ones who are protesting against empathy, and so that's the part that feels odd to me. Is that am I being mean, or let's let Mike have a moment. What do you think, Mike?
No, you go, Malcolm. You go, and then I'll chime in.
I have a question because there was a quote in one of these podcasts that I was wondering what you thought about it. Okay. So Rigney is outlining this conversation that he was having in a church context where they were talking about white fragility. Yeah. And Rigney is saying, it's like, you know, like I heard that and I'm like, yeah, like I completely completely understand what that like. Yeah. I know, you know, I've been in conversations with white folks where any conversation about race kind of people immediately shut down.
Yeah.
But then he said, like, in this context, I spoke up and said, well, you know, can we talk about black fragility?
Yeah.
And he said that he felt that he was shut down. Like he felt that he was shut down in that moment by making that comment. How does that strike you? How does that strike you?
I mean, forgive me. Like, I didn't read the book White Fragility.
That's fine.
So I mean, I don't know. So are you? So what? Can you ask me? Can you ask me the question in a different way? Like, how do I feel about the term Black fragility?
Yeah. Well, I'm just so the context in which he's asking it. So I'll say it this way. One of the issues, and this is a legitimate issue, especially in a number of the conversations about race over the course of the last few years, like people feel as though their language has been policed. Yeah. And in many ways.
I see what you're saying.
It has.
Yeah.
But I also feel like there is a general wisdom about not only kind of what race is and how it functions that is still lacking in some situations where the assumption is, okay, like we've had all this conversation about white fragility and how white people don't want to talk about race, but what about black people?
I think that's
so similar to
go ahead.
I think of it, the parallel that I think about is when I'm in some of these contexts and talk about some of these things and the response of, well, like, what about black on black crime? Yeah, coming from my white brothers and sisters.
I think this is the thing. I think that there has to be some cultural sensitivity to understand that the power balance and the historical things that have happened inform conversations. Mm-hmm. And so there are a series of tropes that are often kind of tossed in front of Black people that are triggering, not because they're not serious problems. Like, we don't deny that there is a thing called black on black crime, but the way that those things are presented is that they're presented as precursors to any discussions about justice. Yeah. And so if you are like the 15th person who told me to read Thomas Sowell, then like, yes, I might be particularly triggered because there's these tropes. And I think that it is not an unfair request to say, if we're going to have a conversation about race, can we at least have this conversation in good faith? Yeah. And there's a difference between asking for a conversation in good faith and being frustrated by the fact that we don't have these conversations in good faith on one side, and this idea that any discussion about race, I emotionally shut down. Yeah. Now, I do think that one of the things that and this is one of the questions that I wish the church could do this, is not every single racial incident is going to be seen the same way. And not every single thing is going, an incident can't do all the work that we want it to do. A lot of times the incident happens, we want that incident to prove historic racism. And so the battle around that incident isn't about the incident itself. It's about the finally, let's settle this historic moment on this singular event. And so people of goodwill can actually disagree. And I would love it to be in this case where me and my brother and sister, regardless, or whatever their race is, that we're attempting together to find justice and righteousness. And I believe that you actually have that in mind. And if we come to a disagreement there, then we can disagree as friends. But when you need something to be false to justify an ongoing narrative, then that's when the frustration becomes. So I just wish that we actually were in a common pursuit of righteousness and justice together. But I don't want to belabor that too much because I want to talk about this last thing. One of the things that this whole conversation has brought up to me, at least it's something I want to get across to in my head, especially relates to empathy. This awoke in me in echoes. Everybody, maybe you don't know, I'm working on a book about the history of slavery and the Bible and the abolitionist movement. And this conversation on empathy reminded me significantly of the abolitionist slavery debate. Because one of the purposes of all of the slave biographies, they would tell you the stories of what happened to them.
Yep.
They would say, we're beaten. And the whole point is, if you were enslaved, if you saw things from their perspective, then you would understand why they want freedom. So the purpose of those narratives was to say, okay, this is what enslaved people are going through, and you're supposed to love your neighbor as yourself. Then if you were in their position, you want to be free, therefore you should free them too. And so the slave narratives were meant to inspire empathy. They would then lead to liberation. The interesting thing about that, though, is that the people on the other side were arguing the exact thing we're hearing now, that this empathy is dangerous. That actually the slaves are inferior because of the curse of Ham, they deserve it, or things aren't that bad. And so the danger was, if you let yourself get caught up in your empathy for these enslaved people, then you're going to end up in danger. The exact same logic was actually functioning in the civil rights movement. Nonviolent protest.
And the lynching era.
The lynching era. I know that's your thing. But nonviolent protest, right? So I go and I march peacefully. And you see hoses turned on me. And you see the dogs. And you look at that person and you say, if I was in their place and all I wanted was a spot at a counter, and the response to that was all of this stuff, therefore I need to change my ways. This idea that seeing in things from the perspective of the oppressed is going to lead you always to moral danger instead of moral insight, to me runs counter to the history of the Black church and counter to what we see in the Bible. And I can give you 1,000 examples. Maybe you got a Bible example you about to drop on us?
Well, not a Bible example, but I would use, so the big analogy Rigney uses over and over again to explain his point of view on this is that he says empathy, the sin of empathy he's talking about, is like if you see someone drowning and you jump in to drown with them. And compassion, which he argues for, is saying, you see someone drowning and I'm going to throw you a life preserver. But I would argue his tradition, the tribe that he is in, I'm not seeing very many life preservers that they are throwing out these days. Yeah. What I'm often hearing is, oh, you got yourself in that mess. You get yourself out of it. Yeah. It's not my responsibility to come save you. You figure it out.
So I'm going to think about the incarnation, which is literally God coming down.
Yes.
Literally God saying, you know what, you guys are so messed up. I'm going to have to come here and fix it myself. Now, and here's the thing, and this is the great thing about why I think I don't care about the term compassion, empathy, whatever. Yeah. Part of understanding a real suffering person is understanding what the suffering person needs is dignity. And sometimes dignity is helping that person get a job. Yeah. And so the idea that if I know what it's actually like to be poor, I know what it's actually like to have want. What I actually need is opportunity. Yeah. And so the idea that empathy is always going to lead me to moral compromise, to me, runs against, the whole point of, there's this story, the story that I'm thinking about, forgive me for talking so much, maybe it's my own podcast, I can.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want.
But there's the story where there's the widow who's given all that she has. And like Jesus is commenting on that, and you're supposed to look at that and say, what kind of world do we live in that we're allowing this kind of thing to happen to her? Mm-hmm. So you're supposed to see things from her. So she gave all that she had. And so you see from her perspective, real devotion. But you're also looking to say, well, what kind of world do we have where the widows are exploited? So empathy, I think we're on empathy is good. Empathy is good. So empathy is good.
I'm pro empathy.
This is
I'm going to say it. It's my hot take.
This is a freezing cold take. It's a freezing cold historical take. The empathy is good. I don't know if we got time to talk about our target boycott. So we're going to close our podcast today with what I'm calling, not so seriously, our moment of cultural shame.
Oh no.
Oh dear.
Oh no.
And this is where we confess that although this is a sports, culture, politics, and movies podcast, then we are not, in fact, the cultural people who we pretend to be.
No, it's all facade.
And so you're going to have to confess that there's something that you can't do or a movie that you can't see that the culture is going to shame you for. As a matter of fact, I'm trying to get you canceled. And once again, since everybody likes you better, Mike, I'm going to give you a chance to confess to the world your moment of cultural shame. What is it that's going on that you are completely unaware of?
Okay, so even though I work at the Holy Post and I work with Sky Jitani, who is maybe the biggest fan of this movie of all time, and I think uses it at least weekly to explain illustrations and points.
Yes.
I've never seen The Godfather.
Ooh, none of them?
None of them.
Tough.
1, 2, or 3.
That's tough. That's a tough one. I'm not sure you can stay on the podcast.
Oh, no.
I've seen Godfather 1. I've seen Godfather, I don't know how many times. Really?
Okay. How many, Esau?
I think I've seen Godfather at least 3 times.
Sure.
Listen, okay, what are you talking about? What are you talking about?
Give me one quote from The Godfather. What's the name of
Well,
one
I
of
can
the
tell you.
characters?
I can tell you about that time where the guy did. I can tell you. Like I'm not a quote guy. I can barely quote. I can barely quote Bible verses. I'm like a memory. Like my brain doesn't remember. I remember when they were trying to get the guy to give the discount or whatever, and then he didn't want to do it.
Don't spoil it. What are you doing? I haven't seen it.
Oh, sorry. I can't prove. Well, never
for
mind.
me.
There's a horse head involved. That was pretty.
I know that reference. I know that reference.
Or when Michael calls a hit on his own brother.
Esau.
Oh, sorry.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. Never mind. He wants to talk to his brother about some things that he's done poorly.
Okay.
Okay. Then, so that is bad.
I know. It's bad.
What is your moment of cultural shame, Malcolm? What are you? What are you down bad on?
Yeah, I've never seen Ted Lasso,
Ugh,
so
that's
Really?
I've never
Wait,
seen that.
didn't you say you haven't either?
Well, no, I seen one. I saw like the first season.
As the white representative on this podcast,
I've never watched it.
Okay.
Never watched
Is there a black show that you haven't seen? So the people. And I want someone to get mad at you. What haven't you seen that get you in black trouble?
So I've never seen Love and Basketball.
Oh,
I've never seen.
Oh, I gotta tell you, since we're having a moment of cultural shame. This one is hard. I don't even know if I can say this on God's podcast network. Not this one, just all podcasts belong to God. I was gonna say that I haven't seen Blackish. I've not seen a single episode of Blackish. So I don't want Black America. I think there's another one called Mixed Dish. I haven't seen any of the issues. So I haven't seen that. But this one is even probably worse. Malcolm, I need this is a moment here.
All right.
Malcolm's nervous.
Okay.
He's like,
I am nervous.
Esau Macaulay cannot do the electric slide.
Oh wow.
I know. Can I tell you what happened? Let me tell you what happened. I know.
Oh wow.
We had to cut this out of the podcast. I was too real. That's too real. Too vulnerable.
Yeah.
So what happened was when electric slide was first popping when I was in elementary school. I was in middle school, elementary school, whatever. When it came up, I'm like, this song is a fad. It's gonna go away. It was like, how long could this possibly last? And I was wrong. And every single wedding for the next decade, I was just like, I'm just gonna sit over here and wait for the the electric slide moment to end. And then every time a black movie ends, I guess we gotta do the electric slide. And I feel like I can see all the characters looking at me going, see? So that is my moment of cultural shame. Please forgive me, Black America. Maybe I'm gonna practice and we're gonna do maybe an electric slide tutorial.
I think for Holy Post Plus only, subscribe. If we get at least 15 new subscribers this week, we will make Esau try the electric slide.
I'm not going to record it, but I'm going to perfect it.
I will record it.
So the next time you see me at a Black gathering, I will be doing the electric slide.
We'll be ready.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Malcolm. It was great to have you.
Of course.
And let everybody know, we mentioned it before. What's the book that you have that's out in these streets today?
Oh, yeah. I got this book. It's called The Anti-Greed Gospel, Why the Love of Money is the Root of Racism and How the Church Can Create a New Way Forward. If you want an introduction to the Black radical tradition, but through really, really Christian eyes.
There we go.
It's for you.
Okay. Mike, you don't have a podcast or anything else to promote. What have you got going on?
Well, my plan, going back to our conversation about setting our sons up to succeed, if all goes according to plan, my son Oliver will be sitting in this chair by the end of the year. It's going to be the Oliver Strelo podcast.
Oh, okay then. I'm sorry to hit the mic. Apparently, I got a couple of weeks left before I'm gone.
He's coming for you, Esau.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I didn't even realize this. Your goal that you're plugging is my replacement. We'll leave that alone. Thank you for coming on what is currently the Esau Macaulay podcast. We'll see if they let me back next week or if it's the Strelo podcast. Thank y'all for listening. The Esau Macaulay podcast is a production of Holy Post Media, produced by Mike Stay Low, Stray Low. If you know, now you know. edited by Seth Gorbett, like a Corvette. Music by Rob Noor. Make sure to follow the show wherever you get your podcast and leave a review so more people can find it. See you next time. I'm out.
I'm penning these letters with prayers they can aid your endeavors. It's clever benevolence, tasted it, wrestle with, still wrestling. Touch my side and it crushed my pride and told me I'm blessed within. Receive a Christian platitude with gratitude, but in the saddest news I live in doesn't add up to the Beatitudes. Catch me in the catacombs, chiefing like they Pat Mahomes, catching bullets, tackle foes, running plays, defending zones. Field got him doing football numbers, only half is grown. He was acting grown.